formed by and builds upon all the work of other reformers that have come before us. Initiative 1068 last year, for instance, failed to get enough signatures to get on the ballot, and we learned a lot from that. California Prop 19 got on the ballot, but then failed narrowly in a statewide vote. And there were a lot of reasons about that. We have a lot of issues that we're facing. The community as a whole, we know that in Seattle, 77% in recent polling support legalization. So this is, it's a relatively easy issue for a progressive prosecutor in the city of Seattle. That said, we still need to have statewide change. And to get a bill on the ballot, and moreover, to get it to pass, we have to make sure that we're addressing the good faith concerns of the average citizen who does not use marijuana, has no objection to people using it. But the central message is a very simple one, Tony. Government has no business telling adults what they do in their private lives absent a compelling public safety reason. And that's what we're trying to do. I'm sorry, you go ahead.
Now that leads me to the next question. Again, it's not legal, but you have a defense.
Correct. For medical marijuana.
So I'm going to say legally, and you can correct me if you want to. I want to move into some questions now in some areas that are probably going to affect more folks individually, whether they're recreational users or medicinal users. Where, as a medicinal patient, can I medicate legally?
Well, first off, we do still have rules statewide against smoking in public.
And what I mean for those listening out there who's a Medicaid, I mean smoke.
Exactly. Smoke. I don't care if it's tobacco or cannabis smoke. We have rules against smoking in public places. You need to observe that. We do have, frankly, some knuckleheads that are out there that want to push the limits. And I'm telling you, I want to do a quick shout out to the Seattle Police Department. You know, I saw them at work in HempFest, and they were there to protect people. There were no arrests. And yet they're trying to do a job. They have a tough job, and they are charged with enforcing the laws. And the law today is that marijuana is illegal, and so they're really in a tough spot. They really are, and we need to give them guidance. But we should also recognize that thus far, Seattle, the police department is trying very, very hard to follow the wishes of the citizenry and still keep us all safe. I think they're doing a marvelous job, and we owe it to them to give them more guidance. And so I'm concerned one day, Tony, I'm going to have the knucklehead that thinks it's okay to blow marijuana smoke in the face of an officer. And I'm telling you, you're going to get prosecuted for assault. Probably not possession, but for assault. And I do hope that we won't see that incident, that Seattle will not only lead the way in law and how we structure legalization, but will also show that the community knows how to behave. You know, we would no more allow you to go drinking whiskey in a car from an open container and not expect you to be stopped than we would if someone were driving and smoking a joint. You cannot be intoxicated and operate a motor vehicle. Of everyone sitting in this room, the most dangerous thing that the average citizen does on practically a daily basis is to operate an automobile. A 2-ton vehicle driving at highway speeds is a missile. And you simply cannot operate that while you're intoxicated. I don't care if it's alcohol, prescription drugs, or cannabis. And unless we can assure the average voter that we mean it when we say that. It's one thing for what you do in your private lives when you're not operating a motor vehicle. It's another thing entirely, though, when you put the public at risk. And so that's why 502, for instance, has a DUI standard in it. That's why it leaves in place all of the medical marijuana laws that we have, such as they are. 502 doesn't touch those. And so you can grow your own as an average, as an authorized medical marijuana user. And the rest of the bill is geared at trying to achieve that amazing goal, legalized sale to adults over 21 for their personal, private, recreational use. And if we can do that, that's an amazing attainment. And we're only going to do that if we also do it responsibly and show that we cannot jeopardize public safety just in the name of this private right.
So, and I'd like to say that once again, I don't think that it's the responsibility of government to come to the community and say, look, this is where it's proper to medicate. It's up to us who are hopefully not knuckleheads to say, look, this is what we would like to do. What do you think about this? You know, here we might be able to have a vaporization station because the city cares about the smoking ordinance, and it's the law. But however, finding some ways of vaporization where where we're sure that these people aren't then going to climb into a car. You know, it's just like a bar. But it's up to the community to be answering these questions.
And you know, if it's not obvious, excuse me for interrupting, Tony, but I did want to say that, you know, responsible leaders like John are exactly what we need to be the face of the movement. And he's absolutely right to distinguish the government side from the both the industry side as well as the community of users. They all have their role to play in this. And unless we all pull together and show that this can be done responsibly, the government doesn't have to be Big Brother and prohibit what people do in their private lives, what adults do in their private lives. If we can all get together and continue and look for that ultimate goal, I think you're going to see Seattle and Washington State, again, leading the nation on this, just as it has done on other issues.
And
So-
hopefully
so
we can
does-
get together and help the knuckleheads come to a.
Well, does that mean that there will be a point in time where the city attorney, someone says, community, we want to hear your voice on this? Because the thing that I didn't hear was, yes, you can medicate here. Can you medicate again? And that was my question since we're having this conversation. If you have now a defense for medicating, is there a place where it is it in your home? Is it in your car and you're not driving? Is it at the beach? Is it at? Give us some idea where you should medicate if you are a medicinal patient and you would like to medicate. Again, smoke.
I'm certainly open to hearing proposals about, you know, locations that people might do it, but other than your home. You know, Tony, I wish I could say that even in your home, you're absolutely safe. Until it's legalized for adult recreational use, unfortunately, that's not the case. We have had an unfortunate incident where the SPD, for all of its best efforts, in response to a citizen complaint, did kick down the door of what turned out to be a valid medical marijuana user with up to the maximum amount of plants he was permitted to use. He had 3 plants, just cut right to it. And so it was an improper break. But you know, there was probable cause. The officers did have a complaint. There was smoke that was detected, and you know, they did their investigation. They kicked down the door and unfortunately found that it was a valid authorized user, and he had the 3 plants. Now, how do we avoid that? Well, at some point, you know, the cops are between a rock and a hard place. It is illegal. And so when you've got probable cause, you've got the smell and all that, you're not even truly safe in your own home against an unfortunate incident like that. I don't think for a minute that the SPD would do it again if they had it to do over, knowing now what they didn't know then. But the problem is not so much with the police as it is with the law. And so that's why I keep saying we can exercise our discretion. We can ask our officers to exercise their discretion whether or not to make an arrest. I'm already exercising my discretion not to prosecute those who have been arrested. But until we change the law, Tony, there's really no place that's safe to do it. The best place is your own home, but it's not absolutely guaranteed.
Well,
And keep it, you know, basically what we're dealing with is it's got to be outside public view, and you may not smoke in the city of Seattle inside a public establishment. Now, there are various places out there where vaporization does occur. You know, my recommendation is get a hold of some of your locals, like CDC, the Cannabis Defense Council, and they're going to be able to guide you. One of the things that the community strives to do is to not be overly in your face with our governmental officials, because you know what, they're doing a great job. The city of Seattle, it's a wonderful town, and you know, we don't want to be overly in your face. The city, if you're doing it properly, ultimately doesn't care if you're following the rules. You know, so why be overly confrontational? You need to kind of become part of the community so that you can identify all the spots.
this is Tony B. We're having a discussion about marijuana issues, legality and illegality. My guests are City Attorney Mr. Pete Holmes and also John Davis from the Northwest, why am am I not getting this?
Patient Resource Center.
Northwest Patient
West
Resource
Seattle,
Center.
corner of 35th and Rochester.
I'm going to open the floor up to questions here in a minute. I'm going to ask our studio audience to participate in this. If you've had time, I'm going to give you a couple minutes more to think about it. If you have questions, please make them sort of brief so that we can get an answer and then we can get as many questions in as possible. Before I do that, though, I want to talk to you about the DUI laws. And if you could explain to us what the DUI laws are involving marijuana. Does it mean that if you're driving and an officer stops you because your tail light is broken, or he says your tail light is broken and feels like he smells marijuana in the car, have you just broken a DUI law? How do you get tested if you're, how does it work? How do the DUI laws for marijuana work today?
At present, we do not have for marijuana something analogous to what everyone is familiar with, the BAC test. The .08 is the standard. If you test blood alcohol content of 0.08%, then you have essentially a per se conviction. You have violated our driving while intoxicated rules for alcohol. We, for marijuana, have to rely on a subjective test. An officer has to be able to articulate some erratic drivings, speeding. We also worry about whether or not it's a pretextual stop, like a broken tail light or something like that. But bottom line is, a case is brought today for marijuana DUI based on an officer's observations. And once they have, if they have probable cause to stop you, and then they see, for instance, a smoldering bud in the ashtray, or there's a bag of marijuana or whatever, that's all evidence that goes toward, that would suggest that you are operating a motor vehicle under the influence of cannabis. And then all of that evidence can then be presented to my office, and I will charge DUI cases. Let's make it clear, if it's a good case with probable cause, I will absolutely bring it. And all of that will then ultimately go to a jury after a judge has reviewed the evidence for proper admissibility, and then a jury will decide. Your fate will be in the hands of a jury. Were you operating under a motor vehicle under the influence of cannabis? But there's no per se limit as there is with alcohol at present. My office in the last session did propose, it didn't get out of committee, we did propose a specific blood test level for the active metabolite in THC, the intoxicating, the part that's metabolized quickly, not the part that stays in the bloodstream for a long time. But we did propose this. It did not make it out of committee. There is a similar standard that is a part of I-502, and why I think it's an initiative that will pass, because what we're trying to do is to establish a limit, and it can be adjusted as the science evolves, very much the way we have changed the BAC level from time to time as scientific studies have shown that we need to adjust it. And so my hope is that that will establish a limit for prosecutors where they'll tend to ignore any kind of marijuana that shows up in a blood test, and really look for a level that indicates inebriation when you're driving. And it'll also make it, though, easier to obtain convictions. The whole point being, send a clear message. Use marijuana in your private lives. Do not operate a motor vehicle on the public highways if you choose to do so. At least not while you're inebriated. So that's where we are on it. I'm sorry it's a long-winded explanation, but we do not have the per se test for cannabis that we do for alcohol. I think that the science is starting to point toward us one that we could implement at a state level, and that should in turn provide reassurance to people out there who are concerned that legalization might lead to an increase in driving while stoned.
So right now, if you're a patient and you have intractable pain in your stomach, and you take a couple of puffs, and it doesn't get you high, and you know that because you've been doing it for a while, but it certainly helps the pain, just a couple puffs, you can't get in your car and drive because we don't have a limit, a test limit.
Not legally.
Not legally.
Right.
Not legally.
And Tony, just to add, there are lots of people with intractable pain, terminal conditions that are on prescription drugs, for instance. People are on morphine, whatever. And while they certainly deserve our support and concern and access to medicine, that doesn't mean that they can drive. And it's a trade-off that we have. We want to give comfort to the suffering, but we have to protect the public. And so there are people not on cannabis